Little girl shows her room to a man, not knowing the billionaire CEO once slept there too. Before we begin, comment below and tell us, where are you watching from? Which city are you in? And when it's over, be sure to rate this story from 0 to 10. Enjoy the story. He had a penthouse, a portfolio worth billions, and a skyline view so high it made the stars feel reachable. But no one waiting for him at home. Until the night, a little girl opened the door, rubbed sleep from her eyes, and whispered 5 words that shattered his world. Mommy said you would come. Her room was small, her bed was made of cardboard, and her eyes, they looked just like his. He thought he was there to save her, but she was the one who saved him. The room she showed me, Michael Carter hadn't heard that name in 8 years. Rachel Morrison, the woman he once planned to propose to, the woman who had walked away without looking back and taken the best part of him with her. When the call came at 3:47, he almost didn't answer. In his world of mergers and markets, calls that late meant disaster. But what he heard wasn't about stocks or lawsuits. It was a woman's voice, old and shaking. Rachel collapsed. They're taking her to St. Mary's. She said to call you. Michael sat upright in his bed, the silk sheets falling away unnoticed. His heart hadn't raced like this in years. She asked for me. She was very specific. Said you'd know about the documents. And about Sophie. That name stopped everything. Sophie. The neighbor, Mrs. Patterson. She said. Spoke again, softer now. That little girl is scared. Her mama is all she has. The Bentley glided through the sleeping city, past neighborhoods Michael hadn't seen since the days he still had dirt under his nails and hope in his pockets. He changed into jeans and a t-shirt before arriving, wanting to avoid attention. House number 1247 sagged beneath its own weight, but someone had still tended the garden. Marigolds, stubborn and bright. The door opened before he knocked. Mrs. Patterson, soft eyes, tired voice. She's upstairs, she said. But Sophie's still here, sleeping. Sophie is Rachel's daughter? Mrs. Patterson blinked like the question surprised her. Of course. 7 years old, sweet as anything. 7 years since Rachel left. 8 since they split. And the math, suddenly, hurt more than anything else ever had. Michael found the folder in Rachel's dresser drawer, labeled important. Beneath the medical papers and insurance forms was something smaller. A birth certificate. Sophie Morrison. Mother, Rachel Morrison. Father, unknown. But he knew. A soft sound behind him. A shift in the air. She stood in the doorway, tiny and sleepy, in an oversized t-shirt that reached her knees, brown hair like her mother's, and eyes, green. His eyes. Who are you? She asked, curious, not afraid. I'm a friend of your mommy's. She's at the hospital. She asked me to bring some papers. Sophie nodded solemnly. Mrs. Patterson said a nice man would come. Are you the nice man? Michael could only manage a whisper. I'm trying to be. She stepped closer, small hands curled at her sides. You smell safe. He blinked. What does safe smell like? She shrugged. Like wood and soap, like someone who won't leave. Michael knelt in front of her. What's your name? He asked. Sophie, she said. I'm 7. Mommy says. I'm named after a smart lady who helped sick people. He nodded, barely breathing. Are you hungry? A little. Are you scared? She considered that, only when Mommy's coughing too much. But Mrs. Patterson makes soup. There was silence then, the kind that feels like standing at the edge of something vast. Sophie reached out, took his hand. Come see my room, she said. I painted it myself. She led him down the hallway, barefoot, quiet. Michael followed, his pulse a roar. Inside, the walls were pink, unevenly painted, but lovingly done. The window was cracked. There were hearts drawn in crayon on the floorboards, and in the corner, a stack of flattened cardboard boxes covered in a blanket. "My bed," she said proudly. "Mommy says it's just for now." Michael stared at it, throat tight. Sophie smiled. "It's not bad. I put pillows on the floor so it doesn't make noise when I roll off." She didn't know who he was. She didn't know what he had. And she didn't know that she was his. And that night, in a dim hallway of a house too small for dreams, Michael Carter's life began again, not with a boardroom deal, but with a little girl showing him her cardboard bed and calling it home. Chapter 1. The bed made of cardboard. Sophie didn't walk. She floated barefoot, half asleep, with the quiet grace only children carry when they trust the world will catch them. Michael followed her down the narrow hallway, heart pounding, like a man walking into a memory. The air was still, tinged with lemon cleaner and crayon wax. At the end of the hall, she pushed open a door with chipped paint and turned to him like a host preparing to unveil a palace. "This is my room," she said, beaming. The light from the hallway spilled in and settled on 3 pink walls, unevenly painted by tiny hands. On the 4th wall, a drawing in purple marker, a stick figure of a girl holding a heart beside a taller stick figure in a crown. There was no bed. Not really, just a stack of flattened cardboard moving boxes, folded into the shape of a mattress and covered in a thin pink blanket. 2 worn pillows, stuffed more with hope than cotton, sat at the head. Beside them, a plastic unicorn nightlight, its horn cracked but glowing faintly. Michael stopped in the doorway. She didn't notice his stillness. She was already on her knees, reaching under the bed, if it could be called that, pulling out a small tin box with stickers on it. "I keep my important things in here," she said. "Want to see?" He nodded, because he didn't trust his voice. Sophie lifted the lid. Inside, a friendship bracelet made of yarn, a broken hair clip shaped like a butterfly, 2 smooth river stones, and a folded paper heart with "I love you, Mommy," written in uneven print. Mommy says we can make treasure out of anything if we love it enough. Michael blinked fast. The lump in his throat felt like punishment. "Do you like it here?" he asked. Sophie shrugged. "It's not a castle or anything, but Mommy says a home doesn't have to be big. It just has to have love inside." She smiled again, that soft, unguarded smile. His mother used to smile like that before the world wore it off her. "Sometimes," Sophie added, lowering her voice, "when Mommy coughs too much and I get scared, I turn on the unicorn light and say a little prayer." "What do you pray for?" "For Mommy to get better, and for someone to help." He knelt then, right there, on the scuffed floor of a room that wasn't fit to be called one, because the little girl in front of him, with his eyes and her mother's fierce heart, had unknowingly prayed him into her life. "Do you know your daddy?" he asked gently. Sophie hesitated, then shook her head. "Mommy said he was someone she used to love, but he got busy with the world. I asked if he forgot about us. She said maybe he just didn't know." Michael had to look away, because that was exactly it. He hadn't known. Not about Sophie. Not about the life Rachel had built from the ruins of his absence. Not about cardboard beds, or tin treasure boxes, or unicorn lights keeping the dark at bay. "Sophie," he said, "do you mind if I stay a little while?" She considered him carefully, like a small judge trying to decide if a witness was telling the truth. "You smell safe," she finally said. "And Mommy said you'd come, so I think you're okay." She crawled onto the boxes, curled herself under the thin blanket, and reached for a worn-out bear with a missing eye. "Good night, safe smell man," she whispered. "Good night, Sophie." He stood in the doorway, watching as the light from the unicorn cast pink stars across the walls. Her breathing slowed, peaceful, trusting, and Michael Carter, billionaire, CEO, titan of industry, man who thought he had everything, realized he had nothing. Until this moment, until this room, until this girl, somewhere beneath him. The city pulsed with wealth and noise. But up here, in a room with pink walls and a cardboard bed, Michael Carter found the one thing money had never bought him: a reason to stay. Chapter 2. The birth certificate. He waited until Sophie's breathing settled into that steady, fluttering rhythm only children had. Then quietly, slowly, he backed out of the room and pulled the door until it clicked. The hallway creaked beneath his feet as he moved toward Rachel's bedroom. The one Mrs. Patterson had pointed him to. Michael wasn't sure what he expected. Maybe the ghost of a past version of her. Maybe proof she'd moved on. But when he opened the door, all he found was survival. The bed was neatly made. No headboard. A secondhand dresser with the drawers misaligned. A framed picture on the wall of a lake he didn't recognize. No clutter. No photos. No sign of who she'd been before. Except the top drawer. He opened it with quiet hands, like he was trespassing in something sacred. Inside, one manila folder, a small velvet pouch, a few folded letters worn soft by time. The folder was labeled in neat handwriting, important documents. Hospital. He pulled it out and opened it on the edge of the bed. Insurance papers, emergency contacts, a printout of symptoms she must have Googled. And then, tucked beneath a school immunization form, he saw it. A birth certificate. He froze. His name wasn't on it. That didn't surprise him. What did was how much it hurt. Sophie Morrison, date of birth, 7 years, 3 months ago. Mother, Rachel Morrison. Father, unknown. The word stared back at him, blunt, sharp, almost cruel. But he did the math. 7 years and 3 months ago. He and Rachel were still together. 7 years and 3 months ago. He was working 18-hour days, trying to build Carter Enterprises from the bones of borrowed time and caffeine. 7 years and 3 months ago. He was planning to propose. God, he whispered, his hand trembling slightly as he folded the paper back into the folder. She's mine. He said it like a prayer, like a confession, like something half holy and half regret. Then a sound behind him. He turned. Sophie was back in the doorway, barefoot again, thumb hooked on the edge of her t-shirt. She blinked sleepily and rubbed one eye. Did you find the papers Mommy needed? Michael stood slowly. His heart cracked a little more just watching her. I did. That's good, she said, stepping into the room. Because hospitals are scary when people don't have papers. One time, Mommy cried in the waiting room because they wouldn't see her. I gave her my lollipop. Michael couldn't speak. She walked over to him, small fingers wrapping gently around his. Are you gonna help her now? I promise I will. Sophie nodded solemnly. Mommy said, you used to be someone special to her. That means you're special to me too. Michael knelt again, level with her eyes. He couldn't stop staring at them, green, alive, honest. Sophie, if you ever need anything at all, you tell me, okay? Okay. Even if it's just more blankets, or better pillows, or cookies. She added seriously, Mrs. Patterson's cookies are kinda dry. A laugh escaped him, the kind that didn't feel like laughter so much as survival. I'll work on that. She leaned forward and did something that undid him completely. She hugged him, small arms, warm neck, that little heartbeat against his chest. You smell like wood and something clean, she murmured. You smell like a dad. He froze. She pulled back. That's a good thing. She padded back down the hallway, dragging her bear by one arm. Michael stayed there a long moment, on the edge of Rachel's bed, folder in his lap, thinking about cardboard beds thinking about all the years he'd spent conquering the world, while a little girl with his eyes slept under a leaky roof. He stood finally, closed the drawer, and whispered toward the doorway. I should have known. And maybe if he had just listened better, loved harder, stayed longer, he would have. But now, one thing was certain. He might not have known about her before, but now that he did, he would never, ever let her go. Chapter 3. I always wanted a daddy. The next morning, sunlight stretched through the blinds like it had forgotten where it was spilling soft gold over peeling paint. And a girl still too small for the burdens she carried. Sophie sat at the wobbly kitchen table, legs swinging, a crayon gripped in one hand, and a bowl of soggy cereal pushed to the side. She was drawing something, her tongue between her teeth, utterly focused. Michael stood nearby, still in yesterday's jeans, watching her, with the kind of awe most people reserved for sunsets or miracles. What you working on? He asked gently. Family picture, Sophie said without looking up. It's for Mommy, so she has something pretty when she wakes up. Michael stepped closer. 3 stick figures under a rainbow. 2 big, 1 small. The smallest had pigtails and a pink dress. The tallest had brown hair and a tie. The other had Rachel's smile, even in crayon. Who's this one? He asked, pointing to the tall figure. Sophie looked up, shrugged. I don't know yet. Maybe you, if you want to be in it. He paused. Sophie, do you know what a daddy is? Sure, she said easily. My friend Sadie has one. He picks her up from school and gives her snacks that don't come from clearance bins. He calls her Bug. Hey. Michael blinked. Do you ever wish you had a daddy? Sophie thought about that for a second, then nodded. Yeah, but Mommy says not everyone gets one, and that's okay. Some people have 2 moms. Some have just a grandma. Some have stuffed bears who count if you really believe. He chuckled. Do you believe stuffed bears count? Only mine. She grinned, then tilted her head at him. But I think it'd be nice to have a real one. A daddy. I mean, especially if he was like you. Like me. Yeah, someone who knows how to make Mommy smile. Michael felt something break open in his chest. Not pain. Exactly. More like the opposite. Like a dam lifting. Sophie, he said softly. Can I ask you something really important? She nodded. Would you want me to be your daddy? She stared at him, wide-eyed, crayon stilled between her fingers. The silence stretched, not heavy, not uncomfortable, just deep, like the kind of silence that comes before a truth. Sophie stood, walked around the table, and looked him dead in the eye. He swore he saw Rachel's fire in her gaze, but softer, unburned. Then she placed her small hand on his cheek. You have the same eyes as me, she whispered. I do, and you came when Mommy needed help. You didn't have to, but you did. He nodded, unable to speak. She took a breath. I always imagined if I had a daddy, he'd be someone who smells safe and makes pancakes and tucks me in even when I say I'm not tired. Michael swallowed hard. I can try, he said. I can try to be that man. Sophie wrapped her arms around his waist and hugged him tight. Then yes, she said into his shirt. You can be my daddy. Later that day, after dropping her off at school, Michael sat in his car outside the hospital, still gripping the steering wheel like it might tell him what to do next. His world had shifted again, this time not from loss, but from love. He didn't need to be told anymore. He knew she was his, and he was hers. It wasn't just the resemblance or the birth certificate. It was the way she saw him, not as a billionaire or a stranger, but as someone who could be home. Chapter 4. The House with a Swing. Michael didn't tell Rachel what he was doing. Not yet. She was still in the hospital, fighting for breath, her body recovering from pneumonia, and her spirit worn thin by years of doing too much with too little. And Sophie, she deserved more than cardboard and hand-me-downs. So he started looking. not for a mansion, not for glass walls or marble floors, or anything that screamed power. He was looking for belonging, and he found it on a quiet street in Queens. A white Victorian house with a wraparound porch and a crooked oak tree out back. There were weeds in the flower beds, and the shutters needed repainting. But something about it felt right. It felt like them. 2 days later, he pulled up to Oak Street in a family-sized SUV. Sophie stood on the porch with her coat zipped up to her chin, lunchbox swinging from her wrist. Mrs. Patterson stood behind her, waving from the doorway. "Where are we going today?" Sophie asked, climbing into the back seat. "Well," Michael said, glancing at her in the rearview mirror, "I thought you might help me decide if this house is special enough for your mom." Like a real house, not like ours with the creaky pipes and the scary heater. Exactly like that, except not scary. Her eyes lit up. They drove in silence for a few minutes before Sophie gasped and pressed her nose to the window. "That one? That's the house." Michael smiled. She'd chosen it before he could even pull into the driveway. The white picket fence, the yellow leaves on the porch, the mailbox with no name yet. He parked and turned off the engine. "This is it," he said softly. "Our house." Sophie stared at him. "You mean to live in forever? If your mommy wants to, and if you like it." Inside, the house still smelled of fresh paint and sawdust. The kitchen had a breakfast nook with a window that looked out over the garden. The living room had built-in shelves and a fireplace with soot still in the grate. Upstairs, Sophie's room had been painted soft lavender. A real bed stood against the wall, not cardboard. A desk for homework, a bookshelf waiting for stories. She ran her fingers along the smooth comforter like it might disappear. "This is really for me. All yours." She opened the closet. Dresses in her size, pajamas, tiny shoes lined up like they belonged. Michael watched her take it in, not just the room, but the idea of it, belonging. "And there's more," he said, leading her to the window. In the backyard, under the old oak tree, a wooden swing hung by two thick ropes. Sophie clapped her hands and squealed. "Mommy's gonna cry when she sees this." Happy tears. "I hope." "Yeah," she said. "The good kind. The kind that means, I didn't think anyone would ever love us like this." Michael looked away, because that's exactly what it meant. That night, Sophie walked into Rachel's hospital room with a card in one hand and joy in the other. Guess what? "Mommy," Rachel sat up slowly, still pale but smiling. "What? Baby." "Daddy showed me our new house." Rachel froze. "Our what?" "It's got a kitchen with a round window and a swing, and a room just for me that smells like lavender soap." Michael stood in the doorway, watching the wave of emotion wash over her. "Can I talk to you?" he asked quietly. After Sophie was distracted with the nurse, Rachel's voice was barely above a whisper. "You bought us a house." "I bought a house," he said, "and I hope it becomes ours." "Michael, it's not charity." "Rachel, it's not pity. It's what should have happened a long time ago." She stared at him, torn between fear and gratitude. "You can't just come in and fix everything with money." "I'm not trying to fix it. I'm trying to build something better with you." With her, he stepped closer. "Let me give her what she deserves. Let me give you what you've always given me, even when I didn't know I needed it." She didn't say yes, but she didn't say no. She looked away, biting her lip, and whispered, "You should know. I painted 3 walls pink. I couldn't afford a 4th can." He smiled gently. "Then I'll paint the last wall. Just tell me what color." Chapter 5. The name she hid. It started with construction paper and a school assignment. Sophie was seated at the kitchen table, a glue stick in one hand, a marker in the other, brow furrowed like someone drafting legal testimony. "What's this for again?" Michael asked. rinsing out a mug. Family tree, she answered, matter of fact. Miss Pelton says everyone has one, even if some branches are broken or weird. Rachel stood at the counter beside him, peeling an apple, silent. So, Sophie continued, we already did me. You and Mommy. But we need the other people too, like grandparents. She looked up. Daddy, you said your Mommy and Daddy went to heaven, right? That's right. So I'll put a cloud around their names. But what about you? Mommy. Rachel's hands froze mid-peel. Michael looked at her. Her face had gone still. Mommy, Sophie asked again. Who were your Mommy and Daddy? Rachel's voice was low. Sophie, sweetheart, why don't you go wash up for dinner? We'll finish the tree later. Sophie hesitated, sensing something she couldn't name, but she obeyed. When she was gone, Michael turned to Rachel. Gently, you don't talk about them, ever. She didn't answer, just stared at the half-peeled apple in her hand. Rachel, what is it? A long pause. Then, my name isn't Rachel Morrison. Michael blinked. What? She turned, finally looking him in the eye. Morrison was my mother's maiden name. I took it when I left home. When I left him. Who's him? Rachel exhaled, like releasing a breath she'd been holding for 10 years. My real name is Rachel Thornfield. The name landed between them like a dropped glass. Michael stepped back, as in, Harrison Thornfield. He's my father. It hit harder than he expected, not because of who she was, but because of who she'd been hiding from. Everyone in Manhattan knew the Thornfield name. Real estate empire, ruthless legacy, the kind of man who carved power into marble and considered emotions a liability. Rachel, Michael said quietly, you've been hiding from him. She nodded. Slowly, when I met you, I was already using Morrison. I was working cash jobs, waitressing under fake names. I told you I had no family. That wasn't a lie. It was just the version of truth I could survive. Why didn't you ever tell me? Because back then, you were already struggling to become someone big. I didn't want to be the girl who brought shadows with her. She stepped closer, and when I found out I was pregnant, you and I had just ended things. You said children were a weight you couldn't carry, remember? Michael's chest tightened. I remember. I dialed your number a dozen times, but every time, I imagined you picking up and feeling trapped, so I hung up. You weren't a burden. I was your past, she said gently, and I knew you were running hard into your future. The quiet between them wasn't cold. It was just full, heavy with everything they hadn't said. Then Rachel whispered, but there's something else. Mike, something I never told you. He braced himself, but before she could speak again, her phone rang. She glanced down. The color drained from her face. It's him, your father. She nodded, barely. He's found me. She had spent years building a life from scratch, burying her last name beneath long hours and small kindnesses. But some names, some legacies come back like storms. And Michael knew, deep in his gut, that their quiet days were numbered. Chapter 6, The Estate. The Thornfield estate sat like a thread against the gray November sky. Stone columns, iron gates, a driveway so long it could have had its own zip code. Michael kept one hand on the wheel, the other resting near Rachel's, not quite touching. Her fingers were clenched in her lap, white-knuckled and silent. We can turn back, he said softly. No, Rachel whispered. If we don't go to him, he'll come to Sophie. They'd left Sophie with Mrs. Patterson, telling her it was a grown-up meeting. She believed them, but Michael didn't, because he'd seen the name on the caller ID, private line, and the voice on the other end was colder than anything he'd heard in business rooms. Rachel, it said, you'll bring my granddaughter home. We have much to discuss. Now they were here. A butler opened the door before they could knock, as if the house already knew they were coming. Mr. Carter, Miss Rachel, Mr. Thornfield is expecting you. They were led through rooms that looked like museum exhibits. Marble statues, Persian rugs, oil paintings of stern ancestors. It all smelled of money, so old it had lost its soul. The library was vast, leather-bound books, crystal decanter, fireplaces that had never seen a real flame. And there he was, Harrison Thornfield. He turned from the window slowly, like a man used to being waited on, silver hair, pressed suit, eyes sharp enough to cut stone. Michael had seen photos, but nothing prepared him for the chill in that stare. "Rachel," Harrison said, voice like cold scotch. "You look older." "You look exactly the same," she replied flatly. His eyes moved to Michael. "And this must be the man who replaced me in your life." "You were never in it," Rachel said. "You just tried to own it." A pause. Harrison smiled. "Shall we sit?" He didn't offer them anything to drink, just took his own. Michael sat beside Rachel, her hand brushing his under the table. "Let's skip the pleasantries," Michael said. "Why are we here?" "I want my daughter back." Rachel stiffened. Harrison continued, "And I want my granddaughter raised where she belongs, not in a cardboard bed in Queens, but here with everything she deserves." Michael bit his tongue hard. "You didn't even know she existed," he said. "No, but I do now. And as a Thornfield, she is a legacy. She will be raised with discipline, resources, protection, control." Rachel cut in. "Order," he corrected. The room thickened. "You can't rewrite the past." "Father, I can ensure the future," Harrison replied. "And I'm offering you both something better than you've ever had." He turned to Michael now, voice calm but coiled. "You built a company from nothing. Impressive. But you're still fighting for a seat at the table. I can open doors you don't even know exist. Government contracts, global reach. Marry my daughter. Raise my granddaughter. Accept my name and my resources, and the world is yours." Michael stared at him. "And if I say no, then I make things difficult. Custody battles, reputation damage, audits, delays. You'll bleed by 1,000 cuts." Michael stood slowly. "You think everyone has a price?" he said. "No," Harrison replied smoothly. "Just a point of leverage." "You're wrong," Michael said. "About me, about her, about Sophie." He took Rachel's hand and turned to go. "We're not for sale." Harrison's voice followed them to the door. "Then prepare yourselves, because I don't accept defeat." Michael turned back, calm but steady. "Then you'd better prepare for disappointment." They walked back to the car in silence. Rachel's eyes were wide but unreadable. When they got in, she finally whispered, "He won't stop." "Neither will I." "Mike, this is different. He's not just rich. He's powerful. He has judges, politicians, lawyers, and I have you," Michael said. "And Sophie? That's all the power I need." Michael knew what power looked like. He'd worshipped it once. But now, sitting beside a woman who had defied it and a child who had survived it, he knew there was something stronger than power. Family. Chapter 7. The system. They thought the worst was over. Rachel had come home from the hospital. Sophie had drawn 3 rainbows on the porch steps in sidewalk chalk. And Michael had replaced the broken mailbox himself. By hand. Even though he hadn't touched a hammer in 15 years, the house smelled like cinnamon and second chances. But peace is fragile when you're being hunted. The first sign came on a Thursday. Michael was picking Sophie up from school when the secretary called him into the front office. "We've had a few concerns raised," she said, shuffling papers. "About Sophie's documentation, emergency contacts, medical history, inconsistencies." Michael frowned. "What kind of inconsistencies?" "We were contacted by someone who flagged her enrollment file. Said the home situation may not be what it seems." Michael felt his stomach turn. That night, Rachel was quiet at dinner. She stirred her soup, but didn't eat. "He's starting," she said finally. "My father. He's using the system now." 3 days later, it became official. A woman in a gray blazer knocked on their door at dusk. Janet Walsh, Child Protective Services. She had a badge, a folder, and eyes that never blinked long enough to feel real. "We've received reports concerning Sophie Morrison's welfare, allegations of instability, inconsistent records, and unresolved custody." Michael was stunned. "That's absurd." "I'm sure you believe that," she said flatly. "But we have to investigate every claim." She inspected the house, took notes, asked questions, asked Sophie if she ever felt scared, if she ate enough, if her parents argued. Sophie looked at Michael the whole time, brave but confused. "Why is she asking me this stuff? Daddy, did I do something wrong?" He knelt in front of her. "No, sweetheart, this isn't your fault. Nothing about this is your fault." That night, Rachel broke. "We should have run," she whispered. "Changed our names again. Disappeared. He's gonna take her from us." "No, he's not. He's done it before. To other families. You don't know what he's capable of." Michael stood at the window. The night outside looked still, but it wasn't. It was watching. The next visit was unannounced. Janet Walsh showed up on a Sunday morning. Sophie was still in pajamas. "We're conducting surprise evaluations. Standard protocol," she said. But nothing about it felt standard. Her questions were sharper now, more pointed. She looked at Rachel like she was studying a flaw in glass. "And how long were you operating under a false name?" "Ms. Morrison." Rachel froze. I needed to protect myself. My child." Janet wrote something down. Michael stood between them. "Are you accusing her of being a bad mother? Because she ran from an arranged marriage and built a life from nothing?" Janet didn't answer. The next week was hell. Teachers pulled Sophie aside at school, asked her if she ever heard yelling, if she had a bed, if she ever felt unsafe. She told Michael everything, curled up in his lap, like she had when she was sick. "I told them we have bedtime stories and pancakes," she said. But they didn't smile. Michael hugged her tighter. Sometimes people don't understand what a safe home really looks like. Then came the letter. Emergency custody evaluation. Rachel dropped it on the kitchen table like a bomb. "They're trying to take her." "Mike, they won't. We have 2 weeks, maybe less." And you saw what she wrote in the report. Unstable environment. Unverified parental claims. Michael picked up his phone and dialed, "James, I need the best family lawyer in New York. Someone who handles emergency custody cases. How fast do you need them?" "Faster than Harrison Thornfield can ruin a 7-year-old's life." That afternoon, Margaret Chen walked into their living room like armor wrapped in silk. "I've seen this before," she said, flipping through the file. "Someone powerful makes a few calls, and suddenly, the system works for them." "Can we stop it?" Rachel asked. "Maybe, but we have to prove 2 things. 1, that Sophie's biological father has legal rights." She looked at Michael. "And 2, that Rachel's past doesn't disqualify her future." The house still had warmth. The lavender walls still held Sophie's laughter. But Michael knew now. They weren't just building a family anymore. They were preparing to defend it. Chapter 8. The press conference. The microphones waited like wolves, 3 rows deep. Journalists, paparazzi, social media influencers who hadn't even brushed their hair before going live. The Thornfield name had leaked, and with it, 1,000 questions Rachel wasn't ready to answer. Inside the courthouse lobby, Michael stood beside her, adjusting his tie like armor. Rachel, in a simple navy blouse and borrowed blazer, looked like anything but a billionaire's daughter. She looked like someone tired of hiding. "We don't have to do this," he whispered. "Yes, we do." She looked down at the worn index cards in her hand, the ones Margaret helped her write, bullet points about truth, freedom, and motherhood. But when the courtroom doors opened, Rachel didn't follow the script. She followed her heart. The crowd surged as they stepped to the podium. Michael stood behind her, just close enough to steady her, not close enough to shield. Rachel adjusted the mic. She didn't speak right away. She let the silence stretch, let the noise of flashing cameras and rustling paper die down until her voice soft, clear cut through it, like wind through frost. My name is Rachel Thornfield Morrison. A few gasps, phones raised higher. For years, I hid the Thornfield part of my name, not because I was ashamed, but because I was afraid. She paused, afraid of what power does when it isn't paired with love, afraid that my daughter would become a pawn in a war she never chose. Michael watched her chin lifted, hands shaking just slightly, but she didn't stop. I left home at 19. I changed my name. I worked as a waitress, a cleaner, a clerk. I lived in a studio apartment with leaky pipes and dreams I couldn't afford. And then I had Sophie. She looked out at the crowd, and everything changed. Rachel didn't cry, not when she spoke about carrying Sophie alone, not when she admitted that Michael never knew she was pregnant, not even when she described the night Sophie had her first asthma attack in a laundromat bathroom because she couldn't afford an ER visit. I didn't have a legacy to lean on. I had paper towels. I had kindness from strangers. I had faith. Then she turned slightly toward Michael, and now I have love. He blinked once, hard. Michael Carter is Sophie's father, not just biologically, but in every way that matters. He didn't run when it got hard. He didn't ask for proof before he built her a room. He simply stayed. Rachel took a breath. Her last card slipped to the ground. She didn't pick it up. So here's the truth. I am not a perfect mother. I am not the daughter my father wanted. But I am someone who will never stop fighting for my child. The room erupted with noise, flashes, shouts. Ms. Morrison, are you accusing your father of abuse? Do you plan to press charges? What's your end game here? Rachel shook her head, eyes steady. My end game is peace for Sophie. And with that, she stepped down. Michael followed, hand at the small of her back. Margaret was waiting inside, her smile sharp with pride. You just won public opinion, she whispered. Will that be enough? Rachel asked. We'll find out in court. That night, Sophie drew another picture. This one had more people, a crowd, a microphone, a woman with big eyes and brave shoulders. That's you, Mommy. What am I doing? Rachel asked, brushing her daughter's hair. Telling the truth, Sophie replied, and not being scared. Rachel had spent years hiding from a name. Now, she was reclaiming it not as a prison, but as a choice, not as her father's shadow, but as her daughter's light. Chapter 9. The verdict. The courtroom smelled like old wood and nerves. Rachel sat at the plaintiff's table, fingers laced tightly in her lap. Michael beside her, Margaret flipping through files with the calm of someone who'd walked through fire and taken notes. On the other side, Harrison Thornfield, impeccable suite, half smirk. A team of 4 attorneys who looked like they hadn't smiled since law school. At the center, the judge, gray-haired, no nonsense. Her glasses perched halfway down her nose. The stakes, custody of Sophie. Margaret rose first. Your Honor, this is not a case of neglect. This is a case of power, of whether a billionaire can use systems meant to protect children to instead punish the woman who walked away from his name. She presented receipts, pediatric records, Sophie's artwork, letters from teachers, photographs of the bedroom painted lavender. Love built that home, she said, not wealth. Then came Harrison's lawyer. Miss Morrison has a history of deception. She concealed her identity, denied Mr. Thornfield access to his biological granddaughter. and created a fraudulent household under a false name. He turned to Michael, and Mr. Carter, until recently, was unaware of the child's existence. His paternity has been confirmed by DNA, but presence in a child's life takes more than genetics. It takes stability, commitment, legacy. Michael stood. "I wasn't there for her birth," he said, "but I've been here every moment since I knew." He paused, voice low but steady. "And I will never leave again." Then came the hardest part, Rachel's testimony. She told the story she hadn't even told herself, of growing up in a mansion that never echoed with laughter, of learning to disappear to survive, of leaving everything behind to protect a child who hadn't even taken her first breath. She didn't cry. She didn't blame. She just told the truth. The judge called a recess. Everyone stood, filed out. Michael took Rachel's hand as they waited in the hall. Sophie sat on the bench with her stuffed rabbit in her lap, unaware that the people who loved her most were fighting the kind of war that leaves no scars you can see. "What if we lose?" Rachel asked. "Then we try again," Michael said. "Then we fight harder, but I won't walk away, ever." The bailiff called them back in. Everyone stood as the judge entered. A pause. Papers shuffled, silence thick enough to hold your breath inside it. This court has reviewed the facts, the testimonies, and the best interest of the child, which must always remain paramount. She looked at Harrison. "Mr. Thornfield, wealth and bloodlines do not entitle you to override a child's emotional well-being." Then she turned to Rachel. "Miss Morrison, your decision to change your name and live in anonymity is noted, but your commitment to your daughter is clear." And to Michael, "Mr. Carter, your willingness to step into fatherhood with sincerity and humility is both rare and admirable." A beat. Full custody is awarded to Rachel Morrison and Michael Carter. Shared parental rights, with no visitation granted to Mr. Thornfield at this time. Gasps. Sophie clapped her hands from the back of the room, not knowing exactly what happened, only that it felt like a good thing. Rachel broke, not into sobs, but into the kind of tears that fall when a weight finally lifts. Michael held her hand the whole time. Harrison stood slowly, didn't speak, just stared. Then, for the first time in a very long time, left a room without winning. Outside, cameras flashed, reporters shouted, but Michael picked Sophie up in his arms and whispered, "Let's go home." And home wasn't an address anymore. It was a feeling. Legacy is what you leave behind, but love is what you carry forward. And for the first time, Rachel wasn't running from her name. She was writing a new one. Chapter 10. Thanksgiving. Steam curled from the mashed potatoes like a prayer. The apartment smelled of cinnamon, roasted turkey, and something sweeter peace. The thrifted plates didn't match. The table wobbled slightly on one leg, but no one cared. Sophie sat at the head of the table in a paper crown she made herself. Rachel, radiant in a soft cream sweater, lit the last of the tea candles. And Michael, he was carving the turkey with all the precision of a man who'd signed million-dollar contracts but never once hosted Thanksgiving. "Does this look okay?" he asked, holding up a slice. "It looks like you didn't Google it this year," Rachel teased. "Progress," he said with a grin. Margaret Chen brought pumpkin pie, and her quiet, dry wit, Mrs. Patterson, came in a green scarf and a tin of cornbread. Even Sophie's teacher stopped by with a thank you card. There was laughter. A spilled glass. Someone forgot the cranberry sauce, and someone else used whipped cream instead of sour cream in the mashed potatoes. It was messy. It was real. It was home. After dinner, Rachel stood and tapped her glass with a spoon. "I don't usually make speeches," she began, cheeks pink, "but this year, I think I have to." Everyone quieted. "Last year, we didn't know if we'd make it. This year, we're not just surviving, we're together." She looked down at Sophie, whose hand found hers. We're a family now, not because we're perfect, but because we kept choosing each other, even when it was hard, even when it hurt. Especially then. Michael reached for her other hand, eyes full. After dessert, Sophie dragged Michael outside. Come see what I made. He followed her to the small balcony. A paper sign hung from the railing, painted in crayon letters. Thankful for my mommy. Thankful for my daddy. Thankful we're finally safe. He knelt beside her. You okay? Bug, I'm more than okay, she whispered. I'm thankful. He kissed her temple, fighting back tears. Me too. Kiddo, back inside? Rachel was loading dishes, humming quietly. Michael walked up behind her, slid his arms around her waist. We did it, he said. No, she whispered. You did it. You came back. You stayed. And I'm never leaving again. She turned in his arms. You know, this life, I didn't plan it, but I chose it. The billionaire who thought he had it all, the girl who thought she had nothing left, and the child who whispered a truth that broke and rebuilt them both. They didn't build an empire. They built a home, the life she didn't plan, but chose. The city never stopped humming. Beyond the windows, life rushed on taxis, sirens, skyscrapers wrapped in blinking lights. But inside that little apartment, everything was still. Sophie slept with one hand curled around her stuffed rabbit, her breathing soft as a lullaby. Dishes were washed, leftovers packed into mismatched Tupperware, and on the porch, the light stayed on, just in case someone needed a way back home. Rachel stood by the window, arms wrapped around herself, watching the glow of the skyline, not craving it, not resenting it, just finally at peace with it. Behind her, Michael approached slowly. No grand gesture, no big speech, just a cup of warm cider and a look that said, this. This quiet life was everything he never knew he needed. Cold out? He asked. Not anymore. They didn't need music, or champagne, or million-dollar views. They had healing. They had history. And they had a child who believed in second chances. And maybe that was the richest kind of life after all. She didn't ask to be a Thornfield. He never expected to be a father. But love isn't about bloodlines or bank accounts. It's about who stays, who shows up, who chooses you, even when they don't have to. Tell us, what are your thoughts on this story? Leave a comment and rate it from 0 to 10 below. And if this story touched your heart, don't miss out. Click here to watch more of our latest stories. Make sure to subscribe and tap the notification bell to follow all our bedtime love stories, family journeys, and true love tales. Sometimes, the life you didn't plan becomes the one you're most thankful for.